Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 90's horror films. I'm your host, Jonathan Moody, and I've got my awesome co-host and slash special guest here, Jason Zlatkus. How are you doing, Jason?
Doing great, Jonathan. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Especially such short notice because, I was like, oh crap, I haven't done a 90's horror films yet, and it's actually due tomorrow. So let me, yeah, or whatever. It's due on Friday. So I was like, let's just get this going. So I was like, what can I do? I was looking up 90's horror films, didn't realize Gremlins 2 it was made in 1990. So I was like, all right, but who can I get that has like HBO Max or is like at least watched, has a capability of watching this film? So I asked you and you said sure. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I had seen it before. I saw it. I'd seen it. I'd seen it as a kid, and I actually own it on DVD. But I haven't watched it in since my kids were little, so I haven't watched it in maybe 15 years. You
Wow.
know, yeah. So
So
it.
it's
So I
been a
watched it
while.
again. I did. I watched it again because when you invited me on the show, I decided, well, I better freshen up. So I watched it again, and wow.
It's not what you remember it, is it?
It's not. It doesn't hold up, honestly.
Really? I actually thought it
Yeah.
did, but I'm gonna love hearing your thoughts on it because like I thought actually it's exactly what the world needs to hear right now, in my opinion. But it needs to see right now. But what didn't you think held up? I want to hear that.
Well, okay. So I hear what you're saying about that the what the world needs to hear right now, because there is a correlation between Clamp and another guy who they clearly are making a satire of. They're pointing him out. He's a New York developer, a pretty famous one, and they were even at the time they were doing a satire on him. And now now it still holds true. But I hear what you're. But for me, what didn't hold up is mostly Gizmo himself is really bad. Like there's a scene where Gizmo dances and it looks really
Oh
CGI
yeah.
and
I
it
mean,
looks
I
really
don't even think it's
terrible.
CGI. It was a puppet. It was animatronic puppet at that time.
Well, the parts with the puppets seem to be fine, but there's a part where it's like it's not CGI, but I guess it's like animated or something. It like because it doesn't. It's not like a. You can tell it's like superimposed over the film, and like specifically the parts where he comes out and he does like a whole
When he starts
thing.
dancing and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
That was one of my favorite parts. I was dancing along with Gizmo. I don't know.
You
I was
you liked
enjoying
that
it.
part. You thought that part was good.
I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed seeing him, and I don't know what did you watch it on DVD or did you watch it on HBO?
I watched it on Max. Yeah, on
Okay.
HBO.
See, you know what? It is an HD then, and the problem, we've talked about this on multiple different podcasts that I do. The problem with HD and or like 4K or those kind of things is that like what happened in the 90's and everything and the way it looked was specific, and when you saw it on video it didn't look that bad, right? When you see it on HD it's more defined, and you can see hairs on it on clearer, and everything, and when that happens it looks bad because it wasn't meant to look like that, you know
I
so that's what I think when I watch that.
I was wondering if some of it might be that. I was wondering if some of it might just be that okay, I'm watching it now, and obviously technology has changed, and but that's what I mean. I guess like that's what I mean by kind of didn't hold up for me. There was a bunch of those parts where he looked really terrible. I honestly thought Gizmo himself was really terrible.
I just
Like
thought he wasn't the star of the show or whatever. You know what I mean? He got most of the time he's locked up in a thing. Like I honestly wanted to see more Gizmo, in the
right,
movie.
he. At the end, I watched it with my daughter. We both sat through it, and I turned to her and I said, Gizmo's hardly in it.
Right.
Like honestly, like Gizmo, he is not a big part of the film, but the parts he's in are extra, like what I would say for children.
Yeah.
He's, did you notice though that he's got really human fingernails?
I
Like
did not notice that, but now I
his
want to.
hands, his hands are in it like so much. Like, and he's like, "Ugh, ugh," and all this stuff. And I was like, dude, he's terrible.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
why he's not in it as much. Maybe they couldn't do a lot more with him that they wanted to, so they wanted to really focus on the puppets, running around and everything.
I noticed that Rick Baker did the effects, and Rick Baker does all the great effects of those movies of that era, and so the puppets themselves are really good.
Mm.
The Gremlin puppets, and it's more about Gremlins this one than it is about Mogwais. Really Gizmo's the only Mogwai. The other ones are only Mogwai for maybe 4 minutes,
Until they
and
become gremlins, yeah.
until they become Gremlins like almost right away. And so the effects of the puppets I thought were really cool. I liked the puppets. And
I'm interested to rewatch the first one. I hadn't seen that in a while either. And I should have done like a back-to-back thing, but did not. And so uh it's sort of like the idea is that like it leaves off from the first one or after the first one. I'm guessing they gave the Mogwai back to the grandfather guy, the old guy, basically ran the shop, or whatever. Which
yeah.
I'll say this. I was like thinking about it. They were Clamp Industries or whatever were very nice when it comes to the old guy because they could have been like, you know what, we need this now. We're just going to tear this down without, we don't need him to sign over. We're just going to do it anyway. But then they were like, oh, he's old and you can hear that cough. He's just going to croak you know, uh, and 6 months later he croaked and they're like, let's take over. Or six
So
weeks.
it's
It was 6 weeks. Never mind.
yeah, it wasn't very long, right? So in the first movie, at the end of the movie, when everything, the town is all bizarre and everything, and all this crazy stuff happens, the old guy shows up again, and he takes Gizmo back. I feel like I'm really out of focus, but you're not seeing me out of focus.
No, you look fine to me. I don't know.
Okay, it might just be my eyes are out of focus, but anyway, so he shows up at the end of the movie and he takes Gizmo back. He says, he gives some lesson, oh, you people shouldn't be this way, or I told you, you don't listen, and all this stuff. But he has a grandson, right? So, and the grandson is the one who originally sold the Mogwai to Rand Peltzer, and so the grandson's like, my grandfather doesn't know, and he needs the money. And at the so when they come to this next movie, and they're like, hey, we want to build the Chinatown development or whatever, and he's like, I'm not going to sell, and they treat him really bad. They come in and they look like all his trinkets and they think it's all terrible, and they give him that TV, and then they have like a video cassette that gives them the message, which I thought was hysterical that
Mm.
they were using, and then they're like, keep the TV. And at that time, a TV VCR combo would have been worth a ton of money. And
They could have sold it as a trinket in a store if you wanted to, because he
right.
hated
So
TV, so why not sell it anyway?
he hated TV, that guy, right? So obviously, and that's the segue for Gizmo to watch that 2 second
Rambo.
clip of Rambo, right? But the next thing you know, they're demolishing the building with all the stuff inside, and that's what allows Gizmo to get free, right? Is all they demolish the building with all the stuff inside, but where is the grandson? The grant, like that building, that all the stuff, it would have gone to somebody. It would have been like inherited. So the grandson, like nobody cared. The old guy just dies and all that stuff. They're like, whatever.
Maybe not. I mean, they don't show it, but as you said in the first one, the grandson was the one who sold the thing, so he was obviously one of those people that just didn't care, like or whatever. Like he probably just wanted money, you know, and so he probably, and it doesn't say it or anything, but he was probably they probably came to him afterwards and said, we're gonna buy this from you, and he was like, okay, you know. My grandfather's not here to run it, so
Theoretically, he just sold it, the whole business, right? He
right,
never even he never even came and looked at anything. He could care less about his
right,
grandfather.
exactly.
It
Including Gizmo himself, who's poor Gizmo. You know.
right, right. And then Gizmo's on the street, and those two guys pick him up, and they're all weird about it.
Well, you don't even see the guys at first, right? So you have no idea who these people are. That's just picking up poor Gizmo and taking him away, and you find out it's it's weird. Like that whole building that these people owned had like so many different things in it, like all random, like I forgot what she said, what Phoebe Cates said at one point, but she pointed out all the different things that it had, including a cable network. And also it had its own genetics lab, like or something.
Yeah, the genetics lab. I don't know if you saw it on the door, but it's called the genetics lab is called Splice of Life, and it said designer genes, but genes is Genes, like designer
Did not
genes.
see that. That's awesome. It's awesome that you pick those little things up, or whatever.
I look for all that stuff hidden in the movies, man. That's my thing, you know. And of course, the two guys, the two twins, excuse me, the two twins who pick up Gizmo, they are the cop in Terminator 2 who he's a security guard or whatever, and when
Yeah.
the part where the floor comes up, and then he like copies him, he becomes him, and he like sticks him with the little pointer finger, and he becomes him is because those two guys are twins. So that's how they did that effect. Is they had one twin looking at the other twin. One of them was supposed to be the T-1000, but it's those same actors.
That's funny. I don't know, because that was what, like a year after or something, 91, that they were in that movie. So he was twins in Gremlins, and then he got to play twins again in a way, like, or whatever, have a little scene like that in Terminator 2. That's cool. I didn't think about that.
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
was all
recognize
excited to
him,
see
but I
those
was like,
guys.
he looks familiar.
Yeah, he's the security guard in Terminator 2 who gets it. You
Hmm.
know, and you know what else I loved? Of course, Christopher Lee had a great part as the evil doctor.
Yep.
And so, to me, I that was one of the things I did like about the movie was there was a lot of cool cameos. John Astin, of
John
course, who was
Astin as the janitor, right?
as
Or
the
something.
janitor, and he's the original Gomez Adams from
Yep.
the Adams family,
Also, I
and
believe the father of Sean Astin,
he is the father of Sean
who
Astin.
I
Correct.
adore, like, because he's like one of my icons. Uh, yeah. So then there was Hulk Hogan.
And yeah,
It's
and
a
the
what?
what did you think about that Hogan part? Like it's purposely put in to be ridiculous.
Well, all of it is purposely put in to be ridiculous because to go into that scene, to mention that scene, like they're having a very serious scene in that, and then all of a sudden it starts like the camera starts messing up or whatever, and things start like it becomes like a white screen, and then you see the gremlins playing with their like hands and everything, making hand puppets or whatever, shadows or whatever, and then it turns, it's trying to say like the gremlins are inside your theater, basically, which doesn't really work for home video, as much, but still a cool little thing. And then, interestingly enough, we did matinee for Hollywood Knockbusters a few months back, and matinee, also directed by Joe Dante, was had theater stuff. He loves like William Castle and that kind of stuff. So I wonder if he did anything in the theaters, had like gremlins, like, fake little gremlin puppets appear in every theater and stuff, like, just little puppets appear and people like freak out. Like that would be what I would do. It costs probably a lot more money, but well worth it to have a gimmick, you know?
Yeah, I want to say I saw it in the theater, but I would have been like a junior in high school, and I may not have seen it in the theater. But I can remember either Gremlins or Gremlins 1 driving by the theater and seeing its name on the marquee that Gremlins. I remember when it was playing, but I'm not sure if I saw it in the theater or not. I'm pretty sure I saw one of them in the theater, but I'm not sure if it was the second one or the first one or both.
Wow.
Um, you know, but yeah, but I do remember seeing Karate Kid in the theater. That I do remember. So I know it's the original movie would have been around the same time as Karate Kid probably, and so
It's
I may have seen the first one.
It's funny because I remember seeing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the theater, and that was the same year as Gremlins 2. But I don't think I saw Gremlins 2 in the theater because I would have been 8, I want to say, when that happened. Like 1990, yeah, about 8 years old. And I was basically, not sort of not old enough to really watch somewhat, even though it's PG-13 or whatever. I don't think my parents really wanted me to go see well, like somewhat horror films that would have freaked me out as a kid, you know. But this is a
100%.
family-friendly horror film.
Yeah, and I don't know. I guess it's a horror film. It has monsters in it, and that kind of thing. But I was really thinking it was more like a comedy at this point.
It was. And to
You
go
know,
to what we're talking about with the Hulk, he shows up because they're trying to get rid of the gremlins in the theaters. And that was a funny scene. Like he was just there to scare the gremlins into to putting the film back on,
right?
you
So
know?
who is he aimed at? Is Hulk Hogan? Is he aimed at teenagers? Is he aimed at young kids? Like, who is his appearance for? Or did he just talk to Dante and go, "Listen, brother, I really want to be in your next movie"? Like, I mean, because he plays Hulk Hogan, he doesn't play anybody else. You
Yeah,
know,
they said like I forgot what he called him. Didn't he call him something or did he just say sir? The
he calls
guy
him
that
Hulk.
Hulk, yeah.
Yeah, the
And
the theater like the theater guy he's a major actor, that guy, and he comes over and he goes, "Excuse me, Hulk, but we have gremlin problem." Like,
yeah. See, that was the thing. They had like major actors playing small bit parts in this movie, and I think a lot of it is just because it's just a spoof on everything, you know?
so
It's what
it's definitely that. It's definitely that was one of the things. I think because the first movie is so lovable and it's really fun and everybody liked it. I think they were able then to use it to get a lot of people that wouldn't normally do this kind of movie. They would get them to be in it because Joe Dante is known and the Gremlins is fun, and so they can get all these cool cameos. But the whole movie is even a commentary on itself. When that lady comes out of the theater and she goes, "This is even worse than the first one." Like they
mm.
even make fun of their own movie
Oh,
in the movie.
Leonard Moulton is talking about gremlins and blah blah blah, and then the gremlins attack him. And then he gave Gremlins 2 3 out of 4 3 out of 5 stars or whatever in his review guide, saying it was good, but and I was like, well, at least he's honest, you didn't just use that cameo as a way to say, oh, I'm gonna give this 5 star, so but if you gave it 5 stars or whatever, people would be like, you can't, you're in it, like you can't
Right.
really review the film that you're in. I mean, I don't do that. I don't review any of the films I've acted in or the films I've made because, I'm going to be a little biased, no
Sure.
matter what, you know.
He I think the review he gives of Gremlins 1 was his original actual review of the movie.
Yeah.
Because and he's like, "Oh, Gremlins 1 is so, terrible and it's all awful." I'm sure he said that in real life,
And I bet that's
and
why they won, which is great, because that meant that Joe Dante just has like this, thin skin, right? Like he doesn't, or thick skin,
thick.
whatever,
Yeah,
thick
he
skin,
would be
thick
thick,
skin.
right, right.
Yeah, thin skin would mean that no, he'd be crying over this. But no, he has this thin skin about it, or thick skin. God damn it, same thing.
Right.
Thick skin about himself because he knows, straight up that people are gonna bomb his movies. People are gonna say they're terrible. But the thing is, it doesn't matter what the reviews say. No matter what, it doesn't matter. Like if we review this and we gave it our scores or whatever, it wouldn't matter. You know, right?
Right, right. No, and ultimately in Hollywood, what matters is the box office sales. I mean, that's all anybody cares about. Oh, it's the number one movie in the world. It's the number one movie in, the number one
Exactly.
animated movie or whatever. That's the only thing people seem to care about when it comes to Hollywood. How much money can they make? It's not really about the film. And I think this film says that a lot. It shows that, it's ridiculous. And if you thought the first one was ridiculous, well, we're really going to go crazy with the second one.
Exactly. The first
You
one
know,
was nuts because it all centered around like one house, and everything, and like the neighborhood or whatever. This centered around a building. Like they had to do. I wonder what the next one would be. Like Gremlins in a hotel or Gremlins in a, like, I mean, what? Because they are making another one, by the way.
really,
They've been in talk
they're gonna.
a while. I don't know what's the deal with it, but I know they've been talking about doing it for a while. and everything. And if you look on IMDb, there is a Gremlins 3 in development, you know. So that'd be great.
Wow. The newer batch, the newest batch. Yeah.
The nextest batch,
The next generation. I
the
think
next.
I think honestly doing another Gremlins wouldn't be terrible. I think now with the technology we can do, with the stories we write, I think that it would be pretty cool, you know.
I would
And
not want it all CGI though. I would like it to go back to puppets and animatronics and stuff because I'm sick of like CGI kind of killing off like if like movies like this, but there's Critters. I think Critters just got new stuff because of Shudder, you know. So I would love to see Gremlins. And Gremlins is Warner Brothers, as we know from the very beginning of the film, where we have Daffy Duck the whole time, you
yeah,
know.
that the Daffy Duck thing was really atrocious. That
Do you
was
think
another
so?
part of it. Oh, I hated that. And he comes back at the end and he does like a Ferris Bueller thing during the credits where he like pops up and he's like, "Why are you still here?" You know, and
And then
he does.
he steals Porky Pigs, that's all folks at the end. And
Yeah,
just
it was. I thought that was pretty awful. That shameless promotion.
it was, but I think it was there was a point to it, because I think at that point, because I know later Joe Dante worked on the Looney Tunes. He did I think it was Back in Action or one of them. I don't think he did Space Jam. He did Back in Action, I want to say. So
Really?
yeah, so he was a Looney Tunes guy. Like uh he loves Warner Brothers and Looney Tunes. So he was excited, I bet, to put them in there. But um let's see.
Well,
Yeah,
and
Looney
there's a.
Tunes Back in Action.
Oh
And
wow! And the one of the Gremlins gets a Looney Tunes tattoo,
oh,
or oh, not a Looney Tunes, a Warner Brothers logo. Sorry, the Warner Brothers emblem. One of them gets that as a tattoo.
nice. There was a lot of that. There was a lot of like promotion for Warner Brothers, and I don't know if Warner Brothers at that time was maybe going through some, hard times or anything. And needed selfish or I guess selfish promotion, because it wasn't
Right.
selfless. Um, but what is it? Yeah, so he had done, and Joe Dante had done, well, obviously Gremlins, but he also done one of my favorite movies that I hope to do for one of my other shows at some point, which is Explorers, and everything. So I mean, and one of the guys from Explorers, one of the kids in it is the yogurt jerk. There's two yogurt jerks in
Right.
there. And when they're in the yogurt and everything and pop up, they think it's a rat and it's really a hairy gremlin. Yeah.
That was another scene where they're doing a commentary where the ladies are like, "Are your peanut butters all natural?" And she's like, "Oh, and it's health food because they're eating yogurt, even though it's M&Ms and all this crap all over it." She's like, "Oh, it's health food," and they were totally making a commentary at that time about how the way people eat and the way people live.
Absolutely. There was that. There's commentary on technology and how we're gonna be really, really advanced. And I guess he didn't know how soon, but it wasn't much longer than this movie that we started getting all these smart technology. And they called that building a smart building. And I'm like, did something like that ever exist before? Like, or
So
did he
I
come up with it?
Well, I think it's a takeoff Trump Tower. I think because it's it's supposed to be in New York and but Gremlins, by nature, the term gremlin comes from when technology goes wrong and technology doesn't work right, and so it's supposed to be, oh, you have gremlins in your system, and that's what Futterman. He is the link to sort of that thought process that oh, there's gremlins in the system, and what Dante did, of course, was put actual gremlins
Yeah.
in the system. And so the first thing they do is mess with the technology. One of them even becomes electricity, becomes technology essentially. And
Goes into the technology and into the electric stuff and just starts kind of messing around with everything. I thought that was funny, you
so
know.
how come he can become electrical and not be killed, but everybody else can be killed by it? And then and where did he go at the end? If he's theoretically electricity, he should theoretically still be alive.
I don't know. That's a good question.
I mean, of
I
course, I'm nitpicking a movie about fictitious creatures, but you
well,
know what I'm saying.
I thought that's what they were gonna do at the end, with the electricity, because I hadn't seen it in forever. But I thought they were gonna take a have all of them because they were electrocuting all of them. I thought they were gonna just send them all into the little space where they can never harm anybody ever again, or whatever. Because that's sort of what they do is they trap that little electric guy into, one of the, like where you just can't escape, you know, and everything.
Right,
So I
right.
thought
They
that's
put
what
him
they
in
were
sort
gonna
of like
do,
a
but they literally just melted them, you know.
yeah, they just right, which is cool. And I thought that effect was really neat. I really liked that scene. I really liked the scene where the one is kind of like the smart one is talking, and it kind of like he melts down, and he's like his glasses fall off, and he looks really gnarly. And I thought that was really cool because in the first movie they do that sort of death of Stripe where he melts down and he gets all and he's all gnarly looking. It's super scary at the end. So I thought that was a cool nod to that.
Well, also, yeah, that was interesting because they didn't really go into that kind of thing where they didn't uh him being like wasn't gnarly and scary, you know? These were more funny and goofy. Nobody was really scary in this, you know? They were just except maybe the spider.
The
The
spider,
the
right?
spider was kind of scary at the end, but but the main bad guy was just goofy. He was on the news trying to tell everybody because he was also because they took the brain hormone, you
Right.
know, and I thought and all of a sudden he could talk and he was very smart, which I thought was great. Um I'm like I don't know if you drank brain hormone that would literally happen like that for a creature, you know.
I that was one thing I did think was cool was that they go into the obviously the genetics lab, and they can are able to do a lot of different things. They're able to showcase a lot of different effects. With that, they can make the spider one, they can make the bat one, they can make the vegetable guy. And so I thought that was really cool. That was a neat use of their puppetry to sort of expand the Gremlins universe.
I
I
love
thought that was cool.
I love how that one guy was like, I told you guys not to do the genetics lab. We could have had surgeons and psychologists in here, but no, we had to have a genetics lab. That was the
Yeah,
whole cause of everything.
and I think that's another commentary. I think it is. I think that's another Dante's commentary on that genetics labs are what they are. I mean, we have them in real life. And so I think for him to say, maybe we shouldn't be messing with these things. I think that's another commentary. And I think the technology of the building, that's a commentary. But clearly, like I was saying, Clamp represents someone, and
You
for that,
mentioned his name already, so you can
yeah,
you can pretty much say he pretty much is pre 2016 Trump, like
he is.
way early Trump, 80s and 90s Trump, where he was just a developer who was just famous for being rich, pretty much. He
You
was the
know,
first Kardashian, basically,
they
you know.
show the book that Clamp wrote, and it's literally Trump's book. It's the same cover. It's Art of the Deal. It's the same cover, and it's silver instead of gold. Is how they get away with it. And obviously Clamp, Trump, they're both the same amount of letters.
And then
It's
Clamp
clear,
and Trump sound similar enough, you
right?
know. So I never thought about
Seriously,
it when I was saying that. Then you were kind of mentioning it was somebody like I was like, okay, I sort of get that now, you know. I actually just watched a commercial for McDonald's that had the grimace talking to Donald Trump. Thought that was so funny. Would not happen now. You know, that would
no, no, it definitely wouldn't happen now. And but even though to think, people go, well, he was whatever he, in the presidency, they're even commenting on the way he was all the way back in 1990. Like, they have comments on, what he's doing in New York and what he's about, and how he doesn't know what's going on in his own company, and how he's only concerned about the television. And they have, I mean, they're really like, even then they almost like Joe Dante knew
well,
ahead of time.
it was so funny when we kind of see him in his office and he's just kind of bored, in his office because he didn't really have anything to do. He was getting everybody else to do everything. So he was just like, what am I gonna do? Right, And I love that because like, he wanted to do something, right? So when Billy asked him and what's his name? Prosky, I guess. The basically what's that guy's name? The Robert Picardo's character. Well, I just absolutely love him. And he's in a lot of his movies. He was no, not Prosky, Forster, you know, when
Yeah.
when
Oh, right, right.
bad guy, Forster, and Billy go into the room. He was like, "Hey, I'll help," because he had actually at that point he had I guess he used a garbage disposal or something, and then like or shredder, the shredder, and shredded the gremlin, remember?
Yeah.
And so,
I love
okay,
that guy, Picardo's character. I love that actor. He was great in so many things, and he's sort of the fall guy. For the whole thing. The a Clamp comes off as the hero while Forrester takes the fall.
yeah,
And then I love at the end when he's all, you can have a half day off, like
yeah, and he's
because
like, "Oh, thank you for giving me a half day off," like,
right, even
on
that's
the
a commentary.
but they didn't get all the gremlins at the end. There are some gremlins still around.
So right, so the electrical gremlin could still be there. The obviously the female is still there. And I don't know. I know she's at the time even people were like, "There's a female gremlin," like, and she's the only one. She's like the Smurfette of gremlins, you
Right, she's
know,
a smart fed of gremlins.
because she drank, I guess, the female potion. I don't know how that works, but you know,
Whatever. However, they got made, and so I'm
right.
guessing could she make other female gremlins? Like, can that happen?
Right. How does like I don't know if that gives her reproductive organs or what that really means because obviously the gremlins multiply, which I thought was interesting. If you get the gremlins wet, they produce more gremlins. But if you get a mogwai wet, it produces more mogwais that can then become gremlins.
Right.
And so I thought that was kind of neat that they were like, well, gremlins can just make straight to gremlins.
Right. They don't have to make mogwais from the gremlins, or whatever. They just completely make. So you don't want to get a gremlin wet. And
Right.
as most people should know, if you've seen any of the Gremlins movies, there are three rules for the Gremlins. You can't feed them after midnight, definitely can't. You can't get them wet, and you can't have them direct sunlight will kill them, basically. But light, bright light, they're scared of. So a lot of times they're using flashlights or any kind of light that would just make them freak out. Which I was wondering how can yeah, I guess how bright does a light have to be before they freak out, you know?
Well, they were using those flashlights that are the flashlight,
Mm,
the building that's a flashlight, and you could tell they kept crapping out. They don't work. And which is another commentary on the kind of materials that Clamp was making, and because even his souvenirs are junky,
right,
and so the flashlights don't work. But yeah, I also thought that there was a really fun part where the people that are like I guess they're like at the news desk or at the television screens or whatever, they were commenting on the rules about, well, what if it has something stuck in its teeth and it eats after midnight? Or what if, it flies in an airplane? And all of those things were things that people said after the first movie.
probably, yeah. I don't know. I never that was never things I heard, but I'm pretty sure they heard that, those questions. And
I'm
so
sure they did.
they said a line like, well, I don't know, I didn't make the rules, like, and that's just an easy way to just say as a writer, it could be, I don't know, like we
Right.
can't say that because we're not gonna show that scene, of them having something stuck in their teeth and then swallowing it, and then, uh-oh.
Right. I thought that was pretty cool that they sort of addressed it. And like you said, they don't have a real answer for it. It's hypothetical. And, people want to poke holes in the gremlin story, but ultimately it's about these little creatures. So,
It's
how
just a
real does it
silly
have to be?
idea. Yeah.
Right. It's a ridiculous idea to start with. So, how good can it really, how on point does it have to be?
Because,
To
well,
find that as a flaw.
yeah, because like the original movie was just at that time, everybody was making these little creature movies, Critters and Ghoulies and Gremlins and right? I think they might have been one of the first. All those other ones came out because Gremlins was popular enough or whatever and that stuff. But I don't even think it was that popular to begin with. It became popular, over time.
No,
It
it
became
was. It was huge, and it was huge when it came out.
okay.
And
So did it?
even when he says when at the end when he goes, you know what I see when I see that creature? He goes, I see them with little suction cups stuck to car windows everywhere. They made that toy. That's a real thing.
They said
And
merchandising. You ever thought of
it
merchandising?
it was the merchandising, right? And that toy was real. And Garfield had one, and Garfield was on everybody's car in the 80s. He was
Yep.
stuck on the window just like
I
that.
remember seeing that.
Yeah, and so they're even commenting on the merchandise itself. And there wasn't as much merchandise. There's a lot more Gremlin stuff now. But back then, Gremlins was still there was a stuffed gizmo, there was a bendable stripe, there was a bunch of toys made for the line of Gremlins, and it was huge. And it did spawn, like just like Child's Play spawned a whole bunch of toy movies that would kill you, like Puppet Master and Dolly Dearest and all these other movies where,
Yeah.
the doll comes to life. Gremlins spawned all those movies with, like you're talking about, Critters, where they're essentially just bad gremlins. They're essentially just evil. And Ghoulies, another one where the little monsters come out to get you. And all of that stuff. And we couldn't get enough of that in the 80s. We liked that idea.
So interestingly enough, the first movie cost $7 million. No, wait, $11 million. $11 million. It opening weekend it made $12 million, but over time it made 153 gross $1 million. So it made a huge profit. Gremlins 2 cost $50 million. Opening weekend only made $9 million and grossed $41 million. That's ugh,
Yeah.
didn't
So
even it was a bomb in a way. Like it did not do as well as the other, as the first one did. So I think that's why they didn't end up making a Gremlins 3, you know. Um, but they should have anyway, or made a Gremlins TV show, cartoon. Like, I don't
Well,
know if
back then, movies weren't made into TV shows. Now they're immediately thinking, let's do a series, a spin-off. But back then they weren't doing that. Gremlins, the TV show, wouldn't have taken,
actually
and
would have, because I think Saturday morning cartoons, they were doing a lot of stuff like Karate Kid, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, all that stuff. Well, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was cartoon before it was actually a live action movie, I think.
I guess you're right that okay, so in animated
And
world, I guess it
animated,
could
they
have
could have done an animated Gremlins, and I would have
sure.
been cool with that, I guess, as a kid. But
I
I
was
don't
thinking
think
live
they,
action.
yeah. And they could have brought in Bugs Bunny and shit if they wanted to, since Warner Brothers. Maybe they should do that now. I mean, what is Warner Brothers Discovery doing except, thinking, what would the people want? I would love to see a cartoon made of Gremlins now. I don't know who owns the rights. I know Warner Brothers does, but I don't know, like, if they just greenlight shows and movies like that, because they now are Warner Brothers Discovery, and they are like reevaluating and changing and doing a lot of stuff. Um, so I don't know if they'd have to see if it would be marketable now, to do Gremlins or whatever. Because I mean, they do
Well,
have a fan base.
all they're doing is now is trying to get their superheroes launched. They're just constantly trying to make Batman and make Superman movies and trying to launch the superhero stuff as best they can. And honestly, as far as TV goes, they put out some of the best superhero shows in my opinion. Warner
Yeah, why
Brothers.
not do a
So
Gremlins? Even if it's live action, live action might be tough because if it costs like 50 million back then, that'd be like doing $100 million show now, probably. And it would be $100 million show. You know what I mean? Like, or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it would be tough to like do that. Like, they'd have to keep it way low on budget, in order to make. This would be streaming pretty much. It would be on HBO Max. But I'd watch it.
right. Well, oh yeah, I think it would have a huge fan base because I think now the 90s are really popular, that kind of thing, that nostalgic thing is like you were saying, they're bringing it all back. So I
Hmm.
think that, with a movie and then potentially a show could happen now. And it was $50 million when you think about how many puppets are really in the second one. They
Yeah,
have all the Mogwai puppets, then they have all the Gremlin puppets, and the
there
Gremlin
was
puppets
way
go on
more.
and on. Oh, there were hundreds.
Yeah,
You know,
and that was wonderful. Like, and they all wanted to leave, to go. They wanted to go into New York. They want to attack New York, which I hate to say, but I kind of wanted to see that. I wanted to see Gremlins take Newton. I want to see Gremlins take Manhattan. Come on, you
right?
know,
The Gremlins take Manhattan. Yeah, and
Jason's ta taken Manhattan. The Muppets have taken. Gremlins should take Manhattan. You know,
so so that's what I think they could be worried about when it comes to like a puppet show. Is are they going to end up looking like the Muppets take Manhattan, or with the Gremlins walking around? Hey, here we go.
well, I mean,
So,
the only difference between like the Gremlins and the Muppets or something is the Gremlins are just these silly little things that just like to cause trouble. Because
right,
like all the Gremlins were originally anyway, were like you would hear people say, there's a gremlin down there, right? Which just meant that if something wasn't working, you know, they had a name for something that was supposedly like a fake thing that was screwing up your stuff, like playing fucking with your car or something. Now,
exactly.
right? So Gremlins was just, they had to come up with a name for these things that were running around causing chaos, and that's, the title or whatever. And I love that
in
because
in the first movie, Futterman, when he's messing with his car, he goes, "It's gremlins, I tell you. There's gremlins in the thing," and he doesn't know what a gremlin is. They're
yeah,
not called that. Then he gives them the name because of what you're talking about,
yeah,
because it's that something is messing with the technology, something is messing with the electronic system. It's there's a gremlin in the system, is what they used to say, and
right.
that's obviously where the name comes from.
Dick Miller, man, Dick Miller. He's been in a bunch of Joe Dante stuff, and he used to pop up. I don't think he's around anymore, sadly, but he was one of my favorite, like, actors that you would just see in random things. And you'd be like, ah, I remember him. And he was Futterman, and he was just fantastic. Like, one of my favorite characters in that thing because, like, he was just visiting New York with his wife and happened to visit on the wrong time once again.
Right. And, and yeah, Dick Miller had a great long career. By the time he does Gremlins, he's almost doing it, just to do a movie. Like it's not, I mean, he's a great character, but he's like almost even a cameo himself at that point,
Yeah,
just to
people are
have,
excited
just,
probably to see him back.
right. I thought he was great in the second one.
I
I'm
was
not
sad for his wife.
crazy.
His wife didn't get much stuff to do. It would have been cooler if they both went down and did stuff. Because I felt like they kind of left his wife out there, by herself and then they gave Mr. Futterman all the stuff to do and everything, which, you know, uh,
I,
but
I definitely thought there was going to be more with the wife and her camera. I thought there was going to be more because of the big bright flash that they were going to use that a lot more, and they only used it once.
yep.
So that
So maybe they thought about doing it more, but they decided there was just too much going on. I mean, that movie was filled to the brim with gremlins, like it wasn't like I think the first movie, if I remember correctly, the gremlins were there throughout, but they weren't the main like they it wasn't just like this one where they're like everywhere all the time, or whatever. They were just there. It was more focused on Billy and Phoebe Cates' character. What was her name? Who I love, I adore her because we had just reviewed Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
okay,
So she was in that, but yeah, Kate. Um, Interesting.
right,
Phoebe Cates played Kate, you know.
right, right.
Uh, which I think, if I'm correct, Gremlins number one was 85, right? So that
That
means,
Yeah, that makes sense. Mhm.
so that's like 85 or 84.
I want to say 84, but I think it's
84.
84. Yeah,
So it was 2 years after Fast Times. And she, I mean, she kind of blew up, like with
Yeah,
that. Good for her. I
and
love Phoebe.
they make a stab at her in the first one when they talk about, oh, don't bring up Lincoln's birthday, because in the first one she's like, why, if you say you don't like Christmas, everybody hates on it. Like she makes this whole big thing, and I know they got a bunch of flack for her character being like, I don't like Christmas. And so in the second one, they do a thing where she goes, I don't like Lincoln's birthday, and just to be silly about some holiday.
Yeah, she was talking about Lincoln, and then she was going on and on about Lincoln and stuff, and I was like, what is going, why, what, huh? Is this
That's
some
a
kind of
throwback.
joke?
That Yeah, it's a joke about the first movie. It's a
Okay.
joke about that she goes on and on about why she doesn't like Christmas
Oh, okay.
and
And
tells
it
this
kind of
horrible
takes away the
story.
story. Okay.
Yeah,
Just
it's like some backstory that doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter, no. And what is it? Ulyssary is like, I think we can talk about this another time. Right now we're kind of dealing
Right.
with stuff. Like, let's.
That's a shot at itself again. That's a criticism of the first movie again.
That's
Mhm.
great. I love that. Like, I love that they can poke fun of themselves and poke fun of what's going on in this, like, in the original, and now kind of make it for about the other one. So good. That meant that it had a sense of humor about itself. I mean, it knows exactly what it is. You know,
It knows exactly what it is, and that is something right. And you were talking about the Gremlins versus, like, in the first one the Gremlins are in it, but in this one they're really the stars of the movie. The Gremlins are really, it's about them. Not the other one is more about Gizmo and his like survival and Billy and that kind of stuff. But I thought this one, the Gremlins really are the centerpiece.
yeah, they kind of like we said, like uh, Gizmo's in the back, like Gizmo's hiding basically, or what? Not hiding, but he got locked up, or whatever, and he wasn't able to do anything, so he had to like hone his karate skills and stuff, and start doing like little fighting montages, which I thought were kind of cute.
Oh, that
That's
part was terrible. I thought that was
I thought
terrible.
it was funny. It made me laugh. It made me laugh. That's all I cared about. I didn't care, it would have been even funnier if it had like Rocky type music and everything. And he was like dun
Right.
dun 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 dun, 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 and then he like bounced himself off the stuff or whatever. Like he thought he was gonna do something really cool, and he wasn't able to because he's freaking small little thing.
Right, but he shoots a flaming whiteout jar at the spider and kills it.
Yeah,
you know,
baby.
and
He's Rambo Gizmo at that point.
he's Rambo Gizmo. And you know what's funny is I remembered that more fondly than when I saw it this time. When I saw it this time, I was like, wow. And he,
That's
you know,
not
and he,
that doesn't hold up as well, right?
right, and he does all that training, like the whole montage thing, and he shoots one arrow, and that's it. Like, he was way more badass with a Barbie car than he was with a bow and arrow that he like trained.
That's funny. I don't. The
Yeah,
Barbie car was in the first one, right?
in the first one, right? But that's what
God,
I
I
mean.
need to rewatch that, man. I'm
He
glad
was
it's on
way more.
HBO. You know,
Yeah. So that, like you were talking about, they're still going to make money on it. They're still streaming it, and technically, if you ask me, it's a Christmas movie.
the
So
original first one was a Christmas movie. So, if you guys
right,
want to watch a Christmas movie that stars little green guys running around, little brown guy, with white on him, go check out the original Gremlins, and then watch Gremlins 2 because I even though it didn't do well in the box office, it was a big hit to me, like I remember I think it was a bigger hit on video, you know. More people were excited to see it on video and
right.
everything. So I think and I was on every channel all the time, when I was growing up, but TV was so different back in the early 90's. It was like USA would play Revenge of the Nerds and stuff. Now you gotta find streaming channels that have it, like Tubi, or whatever.
Right. Right.
Because
Yeah, 100%. It's
uh,
definitely different. Yeah, and I remember seeing it a lot. And for those who say it's not a Christmas movie, Gizmo is literally a gift. He's a Christmas gift.
mhm.
He's that's what so he's that the whole premise is that he's a Christmas gift. It's totally a Christmas movie.
I was kind of
And
hoping they would do Christmas for Gremlins too, right? Like make
Right.
it be like, oh, this was set like a year later, or something. And now
Right.
he was living in New York and had a better job, or whatever. Which
They
I
could have they could have done the whole Trump Tower up in in Christmas lights, and or Clamp Tower, and they
Clamp
could have done
Tower.
it all. They could have done it all in Christmas, and I would have thought that would have been really cool. And then
Y-
and you have the if you have the electric gremlin in Christmas. Oh, one other thing I loved about it was when Christopher Lee, when they go in the they're in that laboratory, and they go, "Do you have any bright lights?" And he goes, "No, but I have a whole bunch of small assault weapons."
Yeah.
and he and he goes to a locker and pulls out an Uzi, you
Yep.
know, and they have a gremlin with an Uzi, and I love the fact that they were like, no, we don't have lights, but we do have weaponry.
Yep.
That to me again, that was I thought another brilliant commentary. You
Yeah,
know,
like who cares about we don't need lights, what do lights do? We need fucking assault rifles to take care of this situation. Which, I
right?
mean, does it? Can they get killed with a gun, really?
I
I
don't think they
mean,
can because they showed that one drinking milk and all of the like milk pours out of his holes. So I
yeah.
wasn't sure if he'd been shot or if because or if he was just like, look at me, I'm squirting milk everywhere. But my impression was that he'd been shot.
Well, there was that one guy who's dressed up like Dracula or whatever,
Yeah,
Grandpa whatever, Fred or whatever his name was.
right. Grandpa
He,
Munster, essentially. Yeah,
yeah, he's Grandpa Munster, and you look like Grandpa Munster, but he was played by the boss in Mrs. Doubtfire, which I thought was great. I was
another
like, I
huge
know that guy
actor.
from
Right.
somewhere, and I looked him up,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, I just saw him in a movie called Thief, and he was like the mob boss in Thief with James Caan, and I know him from Mrs. Doubtfire, which was like 3 or 4 years later or whatever. Mrs. Doubtfire, came out and everything, and that was a big hit, you know. Um,
Did you catch the fact when they zoom in on the guy who's smoking and they fire him, the guy who's like the janitor or whatever, he sneaks into the little area and he's smoking a cigarette and they catch him. That guy is the guy. He's Mr. Klopek in The Burbs. He's a
yeah,
huge. He was a huge actor. That guy.
yeah, no, that guy, he was also in a bunch of other stuff. So I know that I knew his name.
Yeah,
And
I
it
knew
was
his.
such a random like scene in a way. Like the cameos sometimes felt like they were like, "Hey, we would love for you to be in this movie," and they're like, "Oh, I only have a couple hours to be able to do it." Like, come on out for a couple hours. We'll just film a small little cameo. We just want you in this movie, you know.
Right. He doesn't even talk, but he makes these great facial expressions up at the camera, and he does this really amazing stuff. And that guy is so rad because he's from The Burbs,
Yeah.
which is
Also
another
directed
great.
by Joe Dante.
There you go. And another great '90s horror movie. Again, kind of knows what it is, kind of along the same lines. I mean, Dante's work to me is some of the better stuff. I loved it.
I'm a huge fan. Like I've always been a fan of his. Since I knew who he was, right? Like when
Right.
I was young, I didn't know who Joe Dante was, But I remember seeing every one of his movies, all the time. And then I'm like, now I look back at him like, good God, this dude was a, you know, famous, guy. It's also funny enough, he became part of the Masters of Horror, thing. And I was like thinking, I mean, Gremlins is sort of horror, but like,
Right.
I don't think he's directed any actual like horror movie, you know? Um,
I, I mean, technically, The Burbs is a horror film, but it's not. It's like a horror comedy, and I think
yeah,
that's what Gremlins is supposed to be—a horror comedy.
yeah.
So I think maybe that's his thing. I did not see his Masters of Horror. I might have. That was a while ago when I was watching those Masters of Horror movies. So I don't know if I saw his or not.
Now I'm trying to find who Henry Gibson. Okay, Henry Gibson was the fired employee, and he
Right.
was very famous. He worked with Joe Dante a lot. I believe you said he was in The Burbs.
Yeah.
Um, and what was the other one he was in? Like I know he's been in a ton of different things. Fired for smoking is his title.
Right.
Yeah,
That's yeah.
it's Werner. It was like Werner Klopek, Dr. Werner Klopek, and the Burbs. He was in Inner Space, which was Joe Dante. So Joe Dante likes to work with the same people, and I
Right.
like that. Like, they have Dick Miller is a typical, Joe Dante guy. That guy, he's worked on a lot of them. Robert Picardo has acted in a ton. So
Right.
he just likes to use a lot of the same actors, and then he puts them in like a sequel if he didn't put them in the first one, or whatever. And I think that's awesome. I really would like to see Joe Dante do more stuff. Like I know, I mean, he's a little older now, but I bet he can, seriously make something really good, now, like especially about this time period. Even if it's not Gremlins 3, and get somebody else for that. It'd be nice to see him do something that's a commentary on social networking and or, horrors of that kind of stuff.
And you know what? That would be this is a perfect time to do something like that. I think if they do Gremlins 3, it has to be a commentary. I think they have to keep it in that tradition and make it a commentary. And the fact that now we all have phones in our pockets, the fact that we all have, social medias, like you said, I think that that's a perfect opportunity to do a movie like that.
It would have to be a commentary on how div divisive, the world is right now. Like there's this group that hates this group that hates that group that hates, there's these people that are all kind of sanctioned out and different. And, I don't want to say anything specific, but because there's just so much of that going on that, you can get it, and then just talk about that and how, you know, um, whatever, there's plenty of things to talk about now, you know. That's what used to be what horror was about. Horror wasn't
Right.
about just some guy in a chainsaw, slashing people up. It was generally, even Texas Chainsaw Massacre was about, commentary on society at that time. Nowadays, it's just about a guy in a chainsaw killing people. But that's not necessarily true. There was that wokeness in whatever, in Chainsaw, the new Chainsaw thing that they were making fun of, poking fun of, and everything and stuff. So there was a little commentary, on
you
it.
know Horror movies always have reflected the time. Like you said, during when Texas Chainsaw was made, people were literally going missing in Texas, and so they wrote a story about it essentially, and about a group of kids and they go missing, and so it's a horror has always reflected people societal fears, and so it's always a commentary. One of the reasons why I love the genre is because it really does. It's not it's creating something. It's creating something that we're afraid of at the moment, because we're not afraid of Frankenstein right now, but we are afraid of things like like you said, the not being together, not seeing each other as people, or we're afraid of things like home invasions, we're afraid of things like being stalked online, and those kind of things that
School
movies are.
shootings, regular shootings, things like
Exactly.
that. I mean, that's the real fear in life,
Right.
And sadly, nobody wants to take on that, or whatever. And I get it because, it's tough to do a horror film about something that's literally the most horrific, probably thing that's happening in the world right now, but
Right.
um
But that's how we
that's
get a show like Handmaid's Tale, because it's a commentary on what's going on, and we get shows like that are and when you think about it, in the 80s, when we're talking about 1984 Gremlins, we're just beginning to put this kind of technology in our homes. Computers are getting ready to come in. Everybody's getting a computer. You got Apple, getting on the scene, and you got the Nintendo's in your house, Atari's in your house, those things. And the technology is becoming a thing, and it's ripe for climate for something like Gremlins to happen.
yeah. um All right, well, the last thing I'll share, because we'll have to wrap this up, but the last thing I want to share is I know you aren't a big fan of how, I guess, Gizmo was this time, the look and everything. But I did love when he talked. Every time he talked, I just got goosebumps. It was Howie Mandel did the voice, and I keep forgetting he did the voice of him, but he did such a great job. And it's always like, at the end when he's like, kind of thing, but you couldn't really hear it. And then he was like, HBO, Cinemax, right? Or MTV,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I just thought,
Yeah.
oh man, he's so cute. I want my own little gizmo. Problem is
And
he's such a pain in the butt. I want one that doesn't have to, you can feed after midnight and doesn't turn into these little fuckers, you know. But I
right.
guess that's what a Mogwai is.
And right, Howie Mandel does the voice, and Howie Mandel does the is obviously the voice of Bobby's World, and it's a really similar voice that Bobby has and Gizmo have. It's a really similar kind of sound that they both make. They're both kind of that young sort of
Child
childlike
and
voice,
yeah.
exactly. And I think Gizmo is intended to be cute. That's why there were stuffed animals of it.
Yeah,
And that's why people say, oh, is Grogu based off him, or are these characters based off Gizmo, and even Furby was supposedly a gremlin, and
basically,
so
yeah.
right because he's adorable.
Yeah, yeah, I never even thought about that. I remember Furby and I was like, is that Gizmo? Looks like a Mogwai to me, and I guess
And
they
they
didn't
made
have
one.
a licensing for it, so like
They
that.
did license one. There is a Gizmo Furby. It does exist.
Wow, I wonder how much that's gotta cost to get a pretty penny now, you know.
Maybe now I would say it's probably pretty popular. Yeah, I would bet it's somebody would want it now for sure. But back then it was just another wow, look at that kind of thing.
Yeah, wow, look at that. Look at what they made there.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
Exactly.
Well,
And
thank you so much.
oh
We're
man, absolutely. It's always my pleasure to join your shows, brother.
yeah, it was fun. I really enjoyed this. Like, I enjoyed rewatching this. It's not my favorite film of all time or anything, but it's definitely up there with movies I'd be very happy to just sit back and watch again. Like if I'm sick and I'm trying to find something on HBO Max, just stumble across Gremlins 2 again. I'm like, okay, but I'd probably watch Gremlins 1 again first, or whatever. I think that's it like and it's not saying that this movie isn't terrible. It's just I think when it gets too much going on and everything, it kind of loses the focus of really everything else. It becomes more like what gremlin can get into the trouble here or over here, what can they start playing with, and everything. And it just gets to be a bit too much to me. And I think if I guess my ADHD is fine with that, kind of like it being so much, but I do like sometimes to just be able to focus on the story, and everything.
Right. This was definitely a visual experience. Definitely a popcorn movie. Not something. Like you said, it's not going to be the best movie you ever saw, but it was definitely not the worst movie I ever saw.
Oh no, no, by far. I think with Leonard Maltin giving it 3 stars, honestly, if I had to give it anything, I'd probably give it 4. I mean, it was fun. But I would probably give like the original Gremlins like 5, like out of 5 stars. You know what I mean? So this is just a star lower. What would you probably give it?
I I think I have to agree with Malton on this. I'd go with a 3, and I think the original is probably a 4 to me. I kind of reserve 5 for something like Raiders of the Lost Ark or some kind of perfect movie. So I
Perfect.
think the original one would be like a 4, and
I don't know. I always thought the first one was sort of perfect. I don't know. Even though like it wasn't as crazy and it did stay in like one location, mainly not focused mainly on the Gremlins. I thought it did have a lot of Gremlins action and stuff. I remember was it Miss Futterman or whatever? I was or somebody. No, it wasn't her, but it was somebody was set up a fucking electric, chair or whatever, and thrown out a window and everything. I just remember that as like an image that'll always haunt my head of like, oh God, I hope something like that never happens to me. Jesus, like
it's funny
scary.
that whenever I see those things, those automatic chairlifts that used to take people up the staircase, I think that movie where it flings her out the roof.
There you go. So there you
Yeah,
go. Gremlins giving you nasty thoughts, but having you remember the movie.
that's
So
it.
that was like this. This movie had some, I'd always remember the Rambo scene. because I think
Right.
I saw it in the trailers like a billion times, to the point where it was, that's just what it was,
Yep.
Um, all right, well, everybody, this is the last episode of 2022. So I will see you guys next year, with a new guest. I have no idea who it will be. I don't know exactly what we're doing yet, but it'll be in January. And I am super excited because 90s horror is some of the most fun to me. A lot of people love 80s and some people like 70s. I grew up in the 90s, really. I was more a kid and a teenager in the 90s. These were the times that I was watching horror films. So these are kind of my movies. And so I'm really excited to share it with everybody else. So once again, thank you, Jason. This was amazing having you on, and I'm sure I'll have you on again, even for something else. So, uh,
Definitely.
but everybody else, hope you enjoyed this, and we will talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye. Thanks again.